But to me, it almost doesn't matter that this has to be chalked up in the win column as far as seasons go, from where they started and everything that came down during this offseason leading into the season. For it to end with a playoff game after last year's 4-11-1 disappointment, this has got to be a thumbs up season for the Birds.
Oh, yeah, unquestionable.
Monday here on Birds 365. And if you're just getting up, just tuning in, no, hell is not freezing over because the Philadelphia Eagles made the playoffs. We just have our first snowfall of the new year. First snowfall of the season, as a matter of fact, here in the Delaware Valley. We'll take it because the Philadelphia Eagles are back in the playoffs after a one-year absence, and here to break it all down for you for the next 2 hours are your Mac and Mac Birds 365 guys, Jody McDonald and John McMullen. Hey, hold on. Let me take a look at you. You did not get injured in FedEx Field yesterday, McMullen.
Jalen Hurts almost did. Could you imagine that story, by the way? He barely gets touched during the game, but it's FedEx Field, so railing collapses, tumbling Eagles fans right at the feet of the starting quarterback. What a disaster that would have been. But
and luckily, Jalen Hurts and the Eagle fans that you mentioned, not hurt. Nobody's hurt. As bad as that video looked, and a great job by our buddy Mike Garafolo catching it and posting it to social media almost immediately. Yes, disaster averted. And it was almost like that with the football game as well. After the Eagles' first half, another game of tale of two halves, where the Eagles play pretty awful in the first half, but then play well enough in the second half to secure a victory, secure a playoff spot, secure a damn good season, Johnny Mac. And I know that we've got one more regular season game to go and then a postseason game. But to me, it almost doesn't matter that this has to be chalked up in the win column as far as seasons go, from where they started and everything that came down during this offseason leading into the season. For it to end with a playoff game after last year's 4-11-1 disappointment, this has got to be a thumbs up season for the Birds.
Oh, yeah, unquestionably. I don't see how you can frame it any other way. The owner himself said transition. Well, transition this. You're in the playoffs. And you're in the playoffs in the year you want to be in the playoffs, if you're going to be the 7th seed or the 6th seed, however it shakes out for the Eagles. Yeah, typically you're up against it, certainly even more so now that they've shifted the playoff and added a team, and there's only one team with a bye, and that'll be the Green Bay Packers. And look, that's a very difficult haul if you're expecting to make a run towards the Super Bowl. But again, if this is the year, this is, we don't know who's going to test positive each week. We don't know who's going to get ruled out. And then the second part of that is the Eagles can run the football on anyone, even though they weren't really effective on paper running the football against the Washington football team. But I will say this, when they needed to run it, they ran it. At the end of the game, they had a number of nice sort of chain-moving runs, weren't great, weren't explosive, to siphon time off the clock, and then all of a sudden you have Taylor Heinicke having to throw the football down the field, which is the last thing he wants to do. So if you have a little bit more time on the clock, Jody, and he can keep going underneath, maybe we're having a different discussion today. But with the timing on the clock, he had to push the ball down the field once. He overthrows the tight end. Interception, game over. Playoffs are here. And the Eagles knew. I mean, look, we all knew. Nothing's certain in the NFL. But if anything's certain, what needed to be happen after the Eagles game was pretty certain. Houston wasn't going to be able to deal with San Francisco. And Sean Mannion was starting the quarterback from Minnesota and Green Bay, and it's 4 degrees and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, come on. And that, the Eagles were giddy after this game because they knew if they won this game, they were going to the playoffs. And sure enough, they're in the playoffs.
Right. One of two things needed to happen in the late afternoon window And you're pretty damn sure you're getting one of them. Maybe the Panthers jump up and bite the Saints. If not, the 49ers take care of the Texans. The latter is what actually happened. And then, foregone conclusion on the Packers in Sunday night. So, yes, the Eagles were in. You mentioned the running game. Boston Scott with his nose for the end zone. And a key element to yesterday was, and it actually made me think a little bit about Doug Peterson, some gutsy calls by Nick Sirianni to go for it on fourth down. Both in the red zone and in the middle of the field. And Boston Scott and Jalen Hurts' ability to sneak. You got a lot of confidence when you need to just get a yard, and you got as good an athletic quarterback as Jalen Hurts is. The Eagles converted a couple of fourth downs, which you're right, takes time off the clock and keeps the chains moving and keeps the clock ticking. And that's why the Eagles were able to do what they did in the second half and put away a win. I feel bad because they won the playoffs. They made the playoffs. They won the game. But we once again have to talk, John, about the slow starts for this football team, both offensively and defensively. Yesterday, for me, the defense was worse. The offense at least moved the ball. They had a couple of drives stall on them. But the defense allowed the Washington football team, who, yes, led by Taylor Heineke, might be better than Gilbert from 12 days ago when the Eagles faced them, but he's still Taylor Heineke, completed his first 11 passes. I think he was 13 for 14 at one point. The Eagles in their passive zone were allowing him to complete, as you pointed out, short passes. Didn't have to push the ball down the field. Yeah, I'll take 8 or 9 yards at a clip. And then they come out and play as well as they did in the second half. Is that Jonathan Gannon's philosophy? You lull the team to sleep by letting them score in the first half and then coming out and throwing a hammer down in the second half? What the hell?
No, I don't think they were happy with the way they played, and the players, I don't think were happy. The defensive players weren't happy with the way they played in the first half. And it was a lot of underneath stuff. 14 for 17 is what Taylor Heineke started in the first half. 170.
I actually think he was 14 of 15. He might add his last 2 passes going incomplete.
No,
I know he completed 11 in a row to start the game.
Yeah, he was definitely 14 of 17. Jalen was 9 of 11. At one point, that both quarterbacks were, I think it was 14 for 14 before Jalen threw an incompletion. So both teams were struggling a little bit early on when it came to coverage. For the Eagles, though, for Washington, they were struggling mightily. And I thought, man, Darryl Roberts was playing left corner, and he could not deal with Devontae. I mean, you could see it. Anybody who's been to FedEx Field, not the greatest the seat views for the media, but still, you get a better view. And I mean, he wasn't close to Devontae Smith. And I'm thinking, well, they got something here. But, for whatever reason, the Eagles, we know why they've changed their philosophy, because they've had so much success running the football. And they stuck with running the football. And, it probably didn't need to be that close. Certainly, they tightened up things defensively in the second half. And to a man, all the defensive players we said, because we asked that, what'd you do different? Nothing. They just tackle. They were not tackling well in the first half. And, this league, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if you're going to let Taylor Heineke throw the ball underneath, if you rally up and tackle, and if you secure guys, if you don't allow the yards after catch, if those drag routes, Terry McLaurin, don't turn into first downs because you're close in coverage. They weren't doing that in the first half. They were able to do it in the second half, and then it creates those third down situations, and Josh Sweat can pin his ears back and get after the quarterback, and good things happen. So it was a poor performance in the first half from the defense. No question about it. 231 yards. They didn't stop the run that well. I mean, Jared Patterson was creating some issues, not big gashes, but he was getting, positive plays. If you go back to Sunday night, I wasn't home for the first half, but in the second half, you see, okay, you have a quarterback who can't play, and you have a great running back. So what did Green Bay do? They just stack the box and they attack the running back, and it smothers, and then you have third and long, over. Punt the football, whatever, sack, it's done. The Eagles were able to do that. Now, Taylor Heineke's a little bit better than Sean Mannion, but same situation. We've seen it in the past with Trevor Siemian and Jake Fromm and Garrett Gilbert and on and on and on. That's what you do. I mean, but you can't keep them in manageable situations, because if it's 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, Jared Patterson might run for 2-3 yards, and all of a sudden the chains move. And that's what was happening in the first half. And they stifled it in the second half, shut out, obviously. And the Eagles offense was able to do enough to win the game. It's a weird game because Nick Sirianni, Jody, used the term calmness. There was an eerie calmness on the sideline. They never thought they were going to lose the game. I knew what he was talking about because I felt the same way in the press box. And I said to myself after this game, and I said, it shouldn't have been this difficult. So you have stuff to complain about, but this is a pretty good football team. And you and I thought it was going to be better than most people, but this team is better than I thought they were going to be. Yep. They're a pretty good football team.
You and I thought we were both being fairly optimistic at 8-9-1, 8-9. Well, they've already won one more game than we thought, and they've got a game left to go. So they could put double-digit victories on the board and get where they are now from 4-11-1 in an offseason where, as Jeff Lurie correctly called it, a transition period, Howie Roseman didn't have a lot of cards to play. You take a $33 million dead cap hit because you decide to move on from Carson Wentz, which, oh, by the way, was the right decision. But it just handcuffs what you can do during the offseason. Look at the Eagles' free agent offseason moves. Bring in a couple of guys from Minnesota, one of which works, Harris at safety, one of which is a blow-up failure with Wilson at linebacker. You take a flyer on a Kerrigan, who I thought was a good signing for the money they signed him for. He has given them absolutely nothing. And that's about it. Cornerback 2, which we talked about, for about 6 straight weeks here on Birds 365 when we first got started. Who's going to be CB2? All right, they got Slay, but you got to have a second call. And they waited and waited and waited and waited. Howie played the game brilliantly, and he got Steven Nelson on a very fair deal. But that's it. They didn't add a wide receiver this offseason. They came back with the same group they had. The only addition, of course, was a huge one, was Devontae Smith, but that wasn't via free agency. This team, with the moves they made during the offseason, really shouldn't be a 9-win team at this time. That falls on the coach. That's Nick Sirianni. He has done an outstanding job taking what he has, putting it into place, building it into a cohesive unit, working the emotions of the players. This is just a really well put together, handled, motivated, put in the right place to succeed team. That's he and his coaching staff. Sirianni's got to get a huge amount of credit for what this team has achieved as of right now.
I mean, I've been calling him the best rookie head coach in this league for a number of weeks now, and I think, that was sort of solidified with this playoff berth. The most impressive thing, you brought up the 4th downs. Now, couple things there. They bailed on the first 4th down. It was early in the game, inside handoff to Jordan Howard, probably out of the shotgun, probably a bad call because he's not completely healthy. Could have went in the shell from that standpoint. And then you look at the 2 Boston Scott touchdowns. Now, Boston Scott is the 3rd string running back on this team. The 3rd string running back. Those are 4th down plays, both of them. The highest leverage situation in a football game. So everybody talks about next man up mentality in this league. It's you hear it so much as a reporter, your ears start to bleed. Blah, blah, blah. Nobody believes it. I talked about the quarterbacks. Nobody. Next man, yeah, you're done. You're done. The most impressive and the highest of leverage situation, he's given the football to a guy who is third string and they're succeeding. One, because Boston Scott is coached up to play in such a situation. He's done it in the past. He's done it before Nick ever got here. So maybe part of it is good depth at the running back position. Certainly part of it is good offensive line. But just the mentality of giving somebody like that the football in that type of situation. These guys are teachers. And that's the most important part. You and I talked a little bit on CBS last night, and I said to you, I don't know what to think of this team in the context of all the issues that have gone their way. And, you know, whether it's other teams having COVID issues and them facing the bad quarterbacks, none of that's their fault. They shouldn't apologize for any of it. But I do, you know, this team is... their sentiment is, okay, get the next guy ready. Other teams' sentiments is, we're done. We're cooked. We can't compete. And you have this defeatist attitude. I don't know what other way to describe it. The Eagles, they just keep chugging along. It's pretty impressive, and that starts with the head coach.
It does. And I'll give him partial credit for giving the ball to Boston Scott in as big a situation as he did. Didn't really have a choice. Miles Sanders not there.
Well, the choice is take the field goal, Jody. The choice is I have a third string running back. Washington's not going great guns offensively. Let me take the field goal. Let me pile up some points, especially after you fail on fourth down. There's a lot of coaches that would have, pulled back and said, I got to get some points on the board. I got to be more cautious. No, he's like, we got Boston Scott. Let's go. We got Boston Scott. No, I know people are going to say, yeah, we got Boston. I mean, come on. This is not, if you're going to be honest, this is not one of the best running backs in professional football. I think it's an impressive mentality that he shows. And he doesn't waver, because a lot of coaches would have took a field goal once they fail on fourth down. A lot of coaches.
I don't know if it's the analytics of it, but Boston Scott is one of the better short running backs down by the goal line in the NFL. The numbers are the numbers. Inside the 5, the guy just finds his way into the end zone, and he did before yesterday, and he did again yesterday. So I give more credit to Boston Scott than Nick Sirianni in that case, but just the nerve to go for it on fourth down with anybody, no matter what. I'm not going to give him more credit because he only had Boston Scott. Boston Scott's great in the red zone. He's great inside the 5.
Who's great inside the 5? You see Corey Dillon last night, 250 pounds with thighs the size of oak trees. That's typically who you want inside the 5-yard line. I'm just saying, you're right. Boston Scott has done an amazing job with this team over the years. But again, I think, there's a lot of coaches that would say, you would rather have a healthy Jordan Howard in that type of situation, moving the pile. That's the type of running back you want inside the 2-yard line on fourth down. I don't know. I think it's pretty impressive.
I think Boston Scott is pretty impressive in what he's been able to do for them. And you know what? I think Jalen Hurts was pretty damn impressive yesterday, too. I know if you just look at the box score and look at the numbers, they don't jump off the page when you got other guys like Joe Burrow throwing for 400 yards, 500 yards around the league. That's what your quarterback's supposed to do. Well, that's not the Eagles. That's not Jalen Hurts. If you're waiting for that day to show up, it's not going to happen. But he was in control of that game. Going back to what you said about Sirianni saying, a calm, even though they were trailing at the half, that there was no panic involved. There was surely no panic in his quarterback. He looked like a guy who was in control of that game all game long, even though they were trailing. A couple of the passes he threw yesterday were actually pretty nice passes. The Washington secondary made a couple of really nice defensive plays, just getting a hand in at the last second. He didn't have his usual who had him open, overthrew, underthrew type of plays yesterday. And he made a couple of plays off schedule, out of the pocket, on the run. The big play to Greg Ward, I'll get to him in a second, was as big a non-touchdown play as there was in yesterday's game. Yeah, Jalen Hurts stamped himself. I want to be able to evaluate however much Jalen Hurts plays these next 2 weeks. And that's another thing we'll get to. Cooper Rush against Gardner Minshew next week. He's the guy. He's the guy. I talked to Marcus Hayes last week, and Marcus said Jalen Hurts is the guy. I said, well, do you want to go there 100%? I'm not 100% yet. Well, I got closer to 100% off that performance yesterday with Jalen Hurts. Yeah, the playoff game is going to be a big evaluating point for the Eagles, but this guy's the QB, Johnny Mack. I don't see the Eagles going another direction now.
Well, I think 95% he's the QB next season. But I also, I left the doors because somebody asked. I think Mark on the JAKIB Media post-game show on 6abc.com, JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Like, share, subscribe. There we go.
Thank you.
First one, Jody. He asked me that question, and I thought about it, and I said, yeah, well, the guy made the playoffs. He's the starting quarterback. And then I said, yeah, but, I don't think you can hamstring yourself. And I always use that term, and and I use it. I always call them FU players. There are a few players. There are a few players that should and could change the Eagles' mind. One of them is available or is going to be available. Now, he might not be available to the Eagles, and that's Deshaun Watson. Look, I think he changes the game. It's nothing against Jalen Hurts. Nothing against Jalen Hurts. But if the stars align, just like the stars align in this season for the Eagles to make the playoffs, if the stars align and you can get that kind of talent free of legal entanglements for pennies on the dollar, and you pass that up, because somebody made a first-round playoff berth when he wasn't supposed to as a starting quarterback, you will rue that day for a very long time. So 95% he's going to be the starting quarterback of this team next year, and then he can prove himself more, and who knows, that might turn into a long-term 10-year franchise starting quarterback. You got to leave the door open just a little tiny bit, because there are certain players. And you just mentioned he's never going to beat Joe Burrow, who had another amazing team. Well, when you say that, that means there are guys out there that could change your way of thinking. And Deshaun Watson is one of those players.
He is John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. This is Birds 365 on a day after Eagles qualified for the playoffs. Didn't know the turnaround from last year's 4-11-1 disaster was going to be this quick. John didn't know it. I didn't know it. Jeff Lurie didn't know it, but it is now a fact and a reality. The Eagles are going to the postseason. We'll come back. I do want to talk a little bit about Greg Ward and his 2 big catches yesterday. Why isn't he in the lineup? And also we'll start to, while we continue to break down yesterday's victory over Washington. Yeah, before we even get to the playoffs, there's a game next week. And the Dallas Cowboys are coming to town. And it doesn't really have that big an impact on either one of the two teams.
That's on Saturday night.
2 weeks ago, I told you, J-Mac, this could be a complete game of substitutes. A preseason game played in week 18 of the regular season, because neither team is going to have a major reason to go out and put forth their best players, their best play calling, showcase what they can do for the post. No. It's not happening this week. Sorry to say, Eagle fans, but I'm telling you right now, they may not start. Well, let me get the break in, then we'll come back and we'll break down Eagles, Cowboys, McMullen and McDonald, Birds 365.